Hi, Mark. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Nikki?
I'm good. Thank you. I'm so happy that you're here on the Blue Whale Pod today, and we're going to talk all about communication, right?
Yes, we
You're
are.
listening to the Blue Whale Pod, hosted by me, Nikki from Blue Whale Communications. The pod is a place for business owners and entrepreneurs to come together and chat all things business, marketing, and entrepreneurship. That includes the highs, the lows, the lessons and surprises, and everything in between. If you have an idea for an episode or you'd like to be a guest, email me at Nikki, that's Nikki, at bluewhalecommunications.ca.
And I'm looking forward to it because I think this is something that's really important for businesses and business owners. And it's one of those things that gets like kind of swept under the rug, or it's not a skill that we tend to focus on, which, like I said, is in, contrast to how important I think it actually is. So, why don't we start by, well, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and your background and what led you to Let's Talk Communication.
Sure. Thank you for the invite today. I'm looking forward to this podcast. My name is Marc Fisher. I own Let's Talk Communication. Um, I have had over 40 years of experience working in various industries. In fact, we were looking at my biography this morning, and it was like people couldn't believe I'd been in that many industries. But it's all been in customer service, customer facing roles where I've had to use conversation skills, de escalation skills. I've done many interviews. People thought I used to be silly because I used to love doing interviews. So I know how to teach what you have to do in an interview. Um, so what led me to this is my wife was having issues with a company in 2013, and she was getting nowhere with the rep she was talking to because the rep was treating her like a number. It was just a robotic conversation. So I came home, I got on the phone, spoke to a manager, and I got the same sort of thing. And basically was telling me in no uncertain terms, didn't come out and say it, but he hinted at it, and my wife was lying. So I wasn't very happy with the conversation, the way it went, the way they were talking to us. I got off the phone. I said to my wife, I said, these people are just robots. They don't know how to talk to people. And she said to me, she says, well, you've been doing it for so long. Put your money where your mouth is. Teach it.
Yeah.
And that's how Let's Talk Communication has become and has started. So it's
Nice.
very exciting. So
Yeah, nothing like a kick in the butt from your spouse, right?
exactly. Hey, put your money where your mouth is. I love it. So you get up and do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then how did you um I guess how did you decide who to approach or who to target? I know you said you spent a lot of time in the customer service industry. So was that kind of where your focus was initially or
Started off focusing on businesses or small businesses because I lived in probably 40,000 population community. And
okay.
the big push was shop local, shop local.
Mhm.
Well, with all the big box stores, it's tough because, the smaller stores are competing with the cheaper prices because they buy in bulk. But if you provide good customer service, people like myself will shop where they're going to get the good customer service over the cheaper product and no
Mhm.
customer service. So
Right.
I started focusing on businesses. And then my daughter, who should know better, was using her phone during a bank meeting. And I thought, students. So then I started to promote to students as well, because students with technology are so into their phones. They're so into email and text messages, social media. They don't know how to communicate or have conversations with people
Mhm.
and effective conversations. So I started promoting it that way. And then a nonprofit group approached me. And then the funny part is my son has special needs. And the last group I ever thought of, and I should have thought of it first because of Darren, was special needs people,
Mm-hmm.
because of the people look at their disability, they don't look at their abilities. And some of them don't know how to talk themselves out so that people do see the ability. So
Right.
I've gone that route. I've coached sports for many years, and I've seen coaches talk to athletes or athletes talk to coaches so disrespectfully. I've gone to that route. There's so many different areas that I can go to.
Yeah. Well, and I think that speaks to how important of a skill it is across all industries, sectors, people, business types, things like that. You mentioned customer service. So how does good communication play into good customer service?
Of good communication, you know it provides, if bosses are providing and communicating with their staff, the staff are more confident and comfortable, and that comes through when they're talking to a customer. And
Mhm.
I think that's so important, because if the rep is, or the salesperson or staff member is at ease, they're going to be able to build that rapport with the customer much better. The customer is going to feel more relaxed. If they're not pushy, if they don't get a lot of communication, it's everything's unpredictable and there's very low morale. And so you can tell when somebody is very excited about their job or somebody's not excited about their job.
Mhm.
And I think having that good communication, the good conversational skills, customers like people that will talk to them when
Mhm.
they're ready to talk.
Right. Okay. I think that's a key point, right? Like, not everyone is in the mood to have these conversations. Sometimes you just want to go into the store, get what you need, and go, like, leave, get out. So, how do you know when it's the right time to communicate, I guess?
I think the best way to do that is, you go up to a customer and you say, you know, is there anything I can help you with? Anything I can direct you to? Anything you're looking for in specific? They tell you something, guide them to it. And then if you need me, I'll just be right here.
Mhm.
And I'll be here to answer any questions for you. That way, the customer's relaxed. You're not sitting over top of their shoulder watching what they're doing. And it just gets that better, more relaxed rapport started.
Mhm.
And then the customer will come and ask you questions if you're not pushy. If you're pushy, they're just going to basically want to leave because they're going to feel uncomfortable. Again,
Mhm.
it's all about comfort level. And I think that's key with the communication. Knowing when to do it or when
Mhm.
to go back to them is, if you see that, I would say if you see them in one spot, or if you see they're stuck,
Right.
then approach them. Is there anything I can help you with? I see that you know, you're here for a bit. How can I help you?
Mhm.
So,
So when we're talking about, excuse me, business owners who maybe have to have a conversation with an employee or a contractor or maybe a customer, you mentioned getting people relaxed a couple of times. So I imagine if you're going in, especially if it's going to be maybe a difficult conversation or something that's not quite so easy or that you've been putting off, if getting them to relax is the first step, then how do you, or maybe it's not the first step, so correct me if I'm wrong, but how do you get the conversation to a place where you're able to have a bit of a more direct um, chat without kind of getting people's backs up?
well, I think the first thing you got to do is, before you go into that conversation, if you know you're going to have a tough conversation with a employee, or it might escalate, you have to
Mhm.
come up with an angle to
Okay.
how to approach the conversation. Then you also have to go in with a calm voice. And I always tell everybody, the first thing I teach in any class is, you talk to your staff, employee, contractor, whoever, the way you would like to be spoken to.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you do that, you'll be off to the start right off the bat. And I think all it is just going in, and you got to start with being positive. You got to be constructive in whatever feedback you're going to provide, and provide them a solution. So, for example, you go in, you say, "Hi, how are you doing?" And you do it at a time when you both have time to talk. You don't do it when you only have 10 minutes, because if there's questions and answers that have to be done, you want to do it in one go. You don't want to do it in two, because the second conversation is going to be a tougher conversation, because the person's going to have their backup already coming back.
Right.
So you go into the conversation when you have lots of time. You chat with the staff member, contractor. You basically let them know that you appreciate what they've done. You do have a few concerns. These are what they are. How have you felt about the situation? And then the key thing to do is you got to listen.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. And what I do a lot of times is, when I had a customer, I've had many escalated situations in my history, what I would do is I would take notes about what the customer's concerns were, or the staff member's concerns, or a contractor. And then what I do is I reiterate them. And then if the other party knows that you're actually listening to the conversation and you've heard them,
Mm-hmm.
right there, it's a cooling off point. They realize that you actually have heard what they're saying, their concerns. And then what you can do is you can address one by one each concern, and make sure that the question and answers are pertinent. So again, every time they ask you a question or they tell you something, you listen.
Mm-hmm.
And then hopefully you get the same respect from them. And you'll be able to tell right off the bat whether that happens. But I think it's easy to stay calm, be patient, but be honest.
Yeah.
They might not like what you say, but at least they know anytime they ask you a question, they'll get a straight answer.
Yeah. I have to think back to a hockey coach that I had in high school, who wasn't necessarily like a favorite of the parents, but I liked him because I always knew where I stood with him. So it wasn't necessarily, I mean, I guess in some ways it was communication, but in other ways it was just very clear boundaries, maybe, or settings. So like you knew where you stood, which I always appreciated. And I'm sure that comes out in these kinds of conversations as well.
Oh, it sure does. It sure does. And you have to remember, everybody's different. You can't take
Mhm.
the same angle in your conversations with each and every person, because I can talk to you one way and I can talk to somebody else another, because you have different personalities. You have, you just talk to people differently. Your
Mhm.
backgrounds, your professions. It just depends on how much you've talked to people. If you don't talk to people a lot in your job,
Mhm.
you are going to have, you're going to probably feel a little tougher when it comes to conversational. If you're coaching and you have to have conversations with parents, athletes, administration staff, that sort of thing. But I think making sure that you realize who you're talking to, again, talking to them like you want to be spoke to. And I do like people that are direct as well,
Mhm.
but you have to handle them differently.
Right.
You have to, and usually direct people like a direct response, because they're
Right.
not
I think that's a
wasting
good
time.
tip.
They're
Yeah.
not wasting time.
Yeah. So how do you, as if you're a business owner and your style is more direct, how do you ensure that your message is getting across and you're communicating properly without coming across as the bad guy or like you're being short?
I think key there is your communication or your conversations you have with your staff at the start.
Mhm.
If you have a new staff member come on, might be good to let them know that you have a more direct style of managing. It's
Mhm.
nothing personal. It's nothing that they've done wrong. It's just you can be a little bit more direct than some of the other bosses they might have had. And if
Mhm.
I know that going in, I'm not going to take things so personally. And a
Right.
lot of people will take things personally right off the bat if they're
Mhm.
not given that heads up. And again, it's the communication between the staff and the managers that's
Mhm.
key. And I think in today's busy society, in the busy world we live in, it's a tough thing to remember. And I think it's key to remember.
Yeah. So how do you do that? Whether you're the business owner or whether you're, I guess, the person delivering the message or the one receiving it, how do you not make it personal? Because like you said, it's hard to do that. So do you have any tips on how to sort of separate your feelings from the matter? And should you even really fully separate your feelings from the matter?
I think it's the relationship that you've built up with your staff or the
Right.
relationship you've built up with your manager. I think if you can build up, and this comes over time, it's not you're going to build that trust and rapport and the relationship overnight.
Mhm.
But I think if you see that, they're treating everybody the same way as they're treating you, or they're as direct with everybody else as they are with you, it's
Mhm.
easy not to take it personally. I think it's just the commonality amongst the staff. You have to be consistent with each staff member. Same
Mhm.
approach with each staff member. It's just you have to remember not everybody's the same. So the approach might be the same, but the words you use might be a little different. And I think that is where the conversational skills training is important and keeps things fresh and makes sure everything's relevant to today's way,
Right.
because we have a lot of younger people in the workforce now. Because a
Mhm.
lot of the baby boomers are retiring. So, they're not used to the talk that we were used to many, many years ago.
Right.
So
So what are some of those conversational skills or what would a training kind of encompass to help prepare people for these kinds of conversations?
I do soft skills, tactical do's and don'ts, like things you can do in a conversation, things you shouldn't do in a conversation. I go through, the three key features in a conversation, approach, attitude, and tone. All
Mhm.
key. I do interview skills, timing of conversations, because again, you don't want to have an important conversation when you only have 10 minutes. It's like, if your spouse, I had a course where I ran, I had a couple come in, and the husband would always ask the wife big financial questions when she had half an hour to get dressed, get ready, have breakfast, get her lunch together, and get out the door.
Mhm.
Well, it's all timing of your conversations. And I think that is the key thing that a lot of people don't think of. I teach de-escalation skills, how to know when a conversation is getting escalated,
Mhm.
and knowing when to basically say, you know what, let's agree to disagree right now. We're not really getting anywhere. We're only getting frustrated. Let's come back to the conversation when we're a little cooler and a better mindset.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people are afraid to say that because everybody wants to win a battle.
Totally. Yeah.
And you're not going to in that situation. It's never going to be a win-win situation if you keep fighting.
Mhm.
So as we all know, but we forget, right? Because we're busy. So
Yeah.
these are some of the things that I go through in my training. And again, the training I do is directed to whatever you need in your business. It's not a set course that I do for everybody. I direct my training towards your personal needs, which is a good thing.
Right. So I want to go back to the de-escalation skills for a minute because I feel like if you as a business owner take the training and you work on your communication skills and you have the right approach going into these conversations, that doesn't guarantee that the person on the other end is in the same space, right? So I can imagine that a lot of these difficult conversations do sort of escalate. So if you are a business owner or someone, a manager, whoever, and you're having this conversation and you do see it kind of getting out of hand, what are some tips you have to bring it back down?
I think just acknowledging the other person's level of frustration is key. I know that, I can tell in your voice that you're not, you know, it's getting to be an irrational conversation versus a rational conversation because you're getting frustrated. You're not liking what you're hearing. I'll be glad to answer your questions. Maybe just take a few breaths,
Mm-hmm.
calm down a little bit, and we can get back to have a rational conversation. And I'll be more than happy to answer all your questions, why I say what I'm saying, how I got to this point, and what we can do to make it better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing. I think taking that minute or two away from the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging that the other person is not happy, acknowledging that they might need some time just to calm down a little,
Mm-hmm.
absorb what you've said, because you want to have a logical conversation in these situations. You don't want to have an emotional conversation with these situations. And I
Right.
think just that acknowledgement, the respect that you're going to give that person some time just to cool off,
Mm-hmm.
and that you're willing to provide solutions for them, I
Right.
think is key. Rather than just saying, well, you're doing this wrong, I don't like it. Well, you know what? This is what we can help you to get this working out better for you. This
Yeah.
is how we can help you. And if they see that, and they're not going to see it when they're frustrated or angry, they'll see it when they're a little calmer. So I think just taking a couple minutes away, taking
Mm-hmm.
a break, and people are afraid to do that. I don't know why. So, I think it's key.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. I could think back to conversations where I've been on the receiving end of bad news. And if I had a 5 minute walk away and come back, I feel like I have a pretty good poker face usually. And it's something that I know clients tell me, like, you're great, like, you're so calm and whatever. But there's a couple of times where the news is more than what you expect, right? And I can think of one time in particular where if I had those 5 minutes to just walk away and come back, it would have been a more productive, conversation. I think that's a really good tip.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think just taking a minute, even in an interview, if you don't have an answer,
Hmm.
don't make one up. Just
Yeah.
say, hey, can you give me a minute? I just want to think about that for a minute. No employer is going to get mad at you for taking your
Right.
time and giving them a right answer.
Yeah. It's funny. I feel like that is something that, at least for me, I've heard often, right? Like right out of school, or it's like when you're doing your interviews, like, don't answer right away, take your time, put your, thoughts together. But until you just said that, I was definitely not thinking of an interview situation when we're talking about communications or conversation skills. But all of this obviously applies to that as well.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, for
It
sure.
does. You know, and in any situation, if you think that you need that time just to take a minute and get your thoughts together and provide a proper answer,
Hmm.
nobody's going to get mad at you for doing that, or they shouldn't, because you're thinking about giving them what you know best.
Hmm. Well, I think it showcases a sense of calmness, but also maturity and ability to think through some, tough, whether it's a question or a situation or whatever. Hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
So, sorry, go ahead.
no, that was it. I was just said so.
Yeah. So, I want to come back to something you said early on where you were talking about your daughter being on her phone. And I do think, I know for me, I would much rather send a quick text or an email or even a voice note than pick up the phone and have a call. So, why is it though? I'm sure I know the answer is that it is better to pick up the phone and have the conversation. So, what do you lose, I guess, in the emails, or why is there such a difference in how those communications are received when it's in person or over the phone versus an email?
Well, first of all, emails, I can send you an email. I have no idea when you're going to respond to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I could be waiting 5 minutes. I could be waiting 5 hours. I could be waiting 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the tone in your email. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a bad mood or I've had something just frustrating just happen and I read your email, I could take it in a totally different sense to what the email was meant to be, or text message. So conversation benefits over email are huge. You can tell the person's being sincere. You can tell they care about what you said. You can tell that they're listening to what your needs and wants are, because you can see them. You see the body language, or you can hear it on the phone or in their voice. And like I said earlier, you can get the questions and answers right away.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't get all the questions and answers done, you can say, look, when is another good time for me to call you? So we have time. Again, it's all timing
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that we get this, this issue resolved or sale done or have your questions answered. But you can do that and it's more productive, because if you can do it in one call, you're doing it maybe in half an hour phone call, whereas email back and forth, I don't understand this. You're going to email back a question. Again, who knows when they're going to respond or
Mm-hmm.
whether you're going to understand. I can ask you all the questions on the phone call or in the conversation face to face, get my answers, and then make an educated decision right away.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more productive for you because I'm not wasting your time having to respond to emails. I'm getting my answers right away so I can make an educated decision faster. So in the end, we're all saving time, and time for everybody in business is money. So
Mm-hmm. Is there a big is there a big difference between an in-person face-to-face conversation versus phone call or a Zoom call in terms of effectiveness, do you think?
I think face-to-face conversation, a little bit more body language. You'll be able to tell where the person's coming from with body language. I mean, Zoom is great. I mean, we're
Mm-hmm.
having a really nice conversation now, and I know you're listening and I'm listening to you, but I mean, who's to say, you know, you're twiddling your fingers below, or you can see in person, whereas you can't see that on Zoom or over the phone.
Right.
So if you can, I would say in person is always better.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can't, over the phone works too.
Yeah.
It's hard when you're in Toronto and I'm in Vancouver that you can't do an in-person visit. But if
Right.
you're within range.
And that's kind of what I was thinking, because especially post-pandemic, we're in such a hybrid workforce, right? Like sometimes you're working together in person, but sometimes you're on opposite ends of the province. Sometimes you're on opposite ends of the country. So then you're dealing with time zone issues as well, right? So that all plays a factor into how you're able to effectively communicate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But you do what you can, but I still think the Zoom or the phone call is still a better option if you can't meet face to face, because at least, again, all your questions will be answered. You make sure you do it at the right time. Does this work? First question, does this time work for you? Do you have a lot of time to chat? No, I
Mm-hmm.
don't. When would you have time to chat? You make that appointment and you can get your conversation done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
No, that totally makes sense. I feel like I have so many more questions and I could keep talking about this forever, but I think we're about at time. So to wrap
sure.
it up, what's a piece of advice that you would give to business owners or managers who are maybe they're struggling with communication or they have an important conversation coming up? What's like the one tip that you would share with them?
I would say don't put your conversational skills on the back burner when it comes to your staff, because it's going to cost you in the end.
Mm-hmm.
Mastering the times when you have these escalated conversations, mastering, the finesse of making the right comments on the phone to a customer is key, and is key to your business's success, and will improve the customer service. And I think I read the other day that a lot more customers are looking for customer service than they are for a cheap purchase.
Right.
So I think I had one that said 74% would choose a store with good customer service over somebody that had a lower price.
Wow,
So
that's a good stat.
Yeah, customer service is conversational skills, because having that one-to-one chat or the two-to-one chat, it helps.
Yeah. Well, and that's how we started this conversation, right? Talking about the customer service industry. So I feel like that's a really nice wrap up. If anyone is interested in getting a hold of you, how can people do that?
They can get a hold of me at mark@letstalkcommunication.ca, or they can call my cell 778-836-8173.
Perfect.
My website is under construction right now, but should be up in the next month. So
Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Mark. I think that was a really good conversation.
there you go. Thanks, Nikki. Yes, it was a good conversation.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. I appreciate you inviting me on. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for taking the time and coming on. I appreciate that. So we'll have to do this again sometime.
Oh, for sure. Anytime.
Awesome. Wonderful. Okay. Thanks, Mark.